November 7th, 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power in Petrograd, sweeping away an exhausted provisional government. The Tsar had fallen a few months earlier, but Russia could not find peace. This new coup did not end the chaos, it unleashed it. In this episode, you will discover the first year of a sprawling civil war. Reds, whites, nationalists, separatists, foreign powers. Everyone wants a piece of a shattered Russia. If you haven't yet watched episode 1, I strongly recommend starting there. It lays the groundwork for this conflict, without which nothing that follows can truly be understood. The link is in the description. After seizing power in Petrograd on November 7, 1917, the Bolsheviks launched a campaign to extend their authority. Moscow, the country's second political center, became a battlefield. For 8 days, fierce fighting pitted Red Guards against Loyalist troops. The city was taken at the cost of several hundred lives. On the same day, the Congress of Soviets adopted decrees on peace and land. Lenin proclaimed Russia's desire to exit the war and announced the redistribution of land to peasants. He declared,
«Да здравствует гражданская война во имя хлеба, ради детей и стариков, ради рабочих и Красной армии, во имя прямой и беспощадной борьбы против помещиков и капиталистов».
In the provinces, pockets of resistance emerged. In Ukraine, the Central Rada proclaimed the Ukrainian People's Republic on November 20th. In Finland, independence was declared on December 6th. The armistice had not yet been signed, but a ceasefire between Russia and the Central Powers was agreed upon on December 15th. It foreshadowed the end of hostilities on the Eastern Front, paving the way for the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. During this period, the volunteer army was founded in Novocherkassk by Kornilov and Alexeyev, composed of former Tsarist officers. It quickly engaged in its first battles against the Bolsheviks in southern Russia. In the Caucasus, Transcaucasia formed a separate federation in early 1918, reflecting the empire's disintegration. Facing these threats, the Bolsheviks dissolved the Constituent Assembly during its first session on January 6, 1918, after a major electoral setback. At the same time, Cossack uprisings multiplied in the Don, the Urals, and Siberia. The newly independent Ukrainian People's Republic faced a major Bolshevik offensive. Under the command of Vladimir Antonov Ovseyenko, Soviet forces advanced rapidly, capturing key cities such as Kharkiv and Poltava. In parallel, on January 23, 1918, the Third All-Russian Congress of Soviets officially proclaimed the creation of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. It became the central state of the new Bolshevik regime, though not yet recognized internationally. On February 9th, Kiev fell to the Bolsheviks, forcing the Ukrainian People's Republic's government to retreat to Zhytomyr. To protect itself, Ukraine signed a separate peace treaty with the Central Powers at Brest-Litovsk, securing their military support in exchange for food supplies. This alliance enabled German and Austro-Hungarian troops to launch a counteroffensive, retaking Kiev on March 1st and pushing the Bolsheviks out of Ukraine. On March 3, 1918, Lenin signed the disastrous Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with the Central Powers, officially ending Russia's participation in World War I. The treaty imposed harsh conditions on Russia: the loss of 800,000 square kilometers of territory, 34% of its population, 32% of its agricultural land, and 89% of its coal mines. Following the treaty, the Allies severed diplomatic relations with Russia and imposed a blockade. These immense losses caused divisions within the Bolshevik Party, with some members viewing the treaty as a betrayal of the revolution. German troops occupied Ukraine and installed a puppet government aligned with their interests. General Pavlo Skoropadsky, with German support, overthrew the Ukrainian People's Republic and established the Ukrainian state, an authoritarian regime backed by the Central Powers. This occupation primarily aimed to secure Ukraine's agricultural resources to support the war effort. In the spring, the Russian Civil War intensified with the opening of multiple fronts. In the Ukrainian countryside, peasant resistance takes shape against the Bolsheviks and the German occupying forces. Figures like Nestor Makhno emerge, leading guerrilla actions against the authorities. These movements reflect the farmers' discontent with requisition policies and the foreign presence. In Finland, The civil war between the socialist Reds and the conservative Whites ends with the victory of the Whites, backed by Germany. In the Baltic states, German occupation intensifies, hindering local aspirations for independence. To the south, Transcaucasia fragments. Georgia declares its independence on May 26th, followed by Armenia and Azerbaijan 2 days later. These new republics face internal conflicts and pressure from the Ottoman Empire, which occupies regions such as Kars and Batumi. The Treaty of Batum, signed on June 4th, formalizes these occupations and imposes harsh conditions on the young Caucasian states. In May 1918, the Czechoslovak legions, formed during World War I to fight against the Austro-Hungarian Empire with the aim of creating an independent Czechoslovak state, revolted against the Bolsheviks in Siberia. The legionnaires quickly took control of strategic cities along the Trans-Siberian Railway, including Omsk, Tomsk, Novosibirsk, and Irkutsk. Their uprising led to the fall of Bolshevik power in Siberia and facilitated the establishment of white governments, notably the Samara Committee and the Ufa Directory. Following this, Leon Trotsky, People's Commissar for War, undertook a complete reorganization of the Red Army. He imposed strict discipline, reinstated military hierarchy, and integrated officers from the former Tsarist army under the supervision of political commissars. This restructuring transformed the Red Army into a centralized and efficient force capable of resisting white offensives. Trotsky stated, "Revolutions are carried out by people, even though they may be nameless. Materialism does not ignore the man who feels, thinks, and acts, but explains him." Meanwhile, on the night of July the 16th to 17th, 1918, the Russian imperial family, held in Yekaterinburg, faced their final moments. At 3:15 a.m., 11 armed men appeared, and the jailer declared to the former Tsar,
Николай Александрович, ваши друзья пытались вас спасти, но им это не удалось. Мы вынуждены вас расстрелять. Ваша жизнь окончена.
The Romanov family was executed on the orders of the Ural Regional Soviet. This decision, driven by fears that the advancing white forces might liberate them, marked the symbolic end of the Romanov dynasty. On July 25, 1918, the Czechoslovak legions captured Yekaterinburg, 8 days after the execution of the imperial family by the Bolsheviks. Too late to save them, but early enough to uncover the first details of their fate. On August 3rd, a British battalion landed in Vladivostok, followed by Japanese, American, French, Italian, and Canadian troops. Their official goal was to secure weapons stockpiles, assist the Czechoslovak Legion, and reopen an eastern front against the Bolsheviks. However, motivations varied. The Japanese deployed up to 70,000 men with territorial ambitions in Siberia, while the Americans, more cautious, limited their engagement to protecting railways and military depots. South of the Caspian Sea, the British launched the Malison mission in Transcaspia. On August 11th, Indian and British troops intervened to support local anti-Bolshevik forces, leading to fierce clashes in Kaka and Dushak. On August 30th, 1918, an assassination attempt on Lenin triggered a wave of repression known as the Red Terror. The Cheka, the Bolshevik political police, carried out mass arrests and summary executions of real or suspected opponents. This policy of terror aimed to eliminate internal resistance and consolidate Bolshevik power. Grigory Zinoviev, a close ally of Lenin, declared, "We must carry along with us 90 million of the 100 million inhabitants of Soviet Russia. As for the rest, we have nothing to say to them. They must be annihilated." In the south, General Anton Denikin consolidated white forces in the North Caucasus. He organized the volunteer army and launched an offensive across the Kuban and Don regions. Despite initial successes, the whites suffered from internal divisions between monarchists, republicans, and other factions, hampering their coordination and military effectiveness. These ideological divisions and the lack of a unified strategy weakened the white camp, despite foreign support and occasional military successes. The Civil War bogged down. On November 11, 1918, Germany signed the armistice, marking the end of World War I. For Soviet Russia, this was a major turning point. The collapse of the German Empire ended the logistical and military support for several satellite regimes created under German influence, notably in Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, and Georgia. The German defeat also paved the way for the resurgence of Poland. After more than a century of partitions between Austria, Hungary, Prussia, and Russia, Poland declared its independence on the day of the armistice. The Second Polish Republic was established, marking the return of a sovereign Polish state to the European stage. In Ukraine, the regime of Hetman Pavlo Skoropadsky, established with direct German military support, suddenly lost its main protector. 2 days after the armistice, the Soviet government unilaterally annulled the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. This decision signaled their intent to reclaim territories lost in the spring, capitalizing on Germany's military collapse. Lenin and Trotsky saw this as a strategic opportunity to reassert Bolshevik control over the former Tsarist Empire's periphery. By the end of 1918, Russia was no longer merely in a civil war. It had become the stage of a global conflict. Internally, Reds and Whites organized, armed, and hardened. Externally, great powers intervened, each with their own interests, calculations, and ambitions. The German Empire had collapsed. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was void, and borders, already blurred, dissolved in violence. The Bolshevik regime was isolated, besieged on multiple fronts. The strengthened white forces launched major offensives. Russia sank deeper into chaos, and the lines would continue to shift. In 1919, the Civil War entered its most critical phase. Kolchak pushed from Siberia, Denikin aimed for Moscow, and the Allies redrew the map in their own way. In Episode 3, we will see how these offensives disrupted the conflict's balance, why 1919 could have marked the end of the Bolshevik regime, and how it survived. Thank you for following this episode to the end. If you learned something new or discovered facts you didn't know, please consider leaving a like. It really helps keep the channel alive. Don't hesitate to subscribe so you don't miss Episode 3, where the war reaches a new level of intensity. And above all, I'm eager to hear your thoughts in the comments. In your opinion, at the end of 1918, who truly held the advantage? The increasingly organized Reds or the Whites, backed by the Allies and victorious on several fronts? Your opinion matters to me. See you soon for the next part, and remember, history never dies as long as we keep telling it.